Hi, I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight is viewer's choice. Um, if anybody has a fly they'd like to see demonstrated or technique they're having trouble with that I might be able to help with, then we can go through that. I also have a presentation on some local fishing opportunities this year that look pretty good. A lot of different things presented to us this year. Before we get started, next week we have a special guest, Tim Jacobs. He's going to do a presentation. He's actually going to do a deer hair bass bug, and he's a pro at that. So we'll all learn a lot. He's going to talk about how to fish it and then any questions that we come up with. And then on the 18th of April is the next to the last of the beginning fly tying class. We're going to be doing the Zug bug. And then 25th of April, I'm not sure. I might do some wet flies. The Leadwing Coachman and the McGinty, which is kind of a fun fly. A couple of real old school wet flies. And then on the 2nd of May, we're getting pretty close to the time when the crappie spawn gives a lot of opportunities for shore fishing around this area. And so two of my favorite streamers, the black-nosed dace and Mickey Finn, and you know why they're good for that type of fishing. So we'll get into all that. Does anybody have anything off the top of their head right now that they want to see tonight? We'll decide how we're going to do it. And nothing heard. I'll let you think about it a little bit, and I'll go ahead and share a screen, and I'll start talking about what we have going on in this area. We had our first fishing event at Halleck Park. They stocked 1,200 rainbows on March 12th. But pretty much every weekend since then has been lousy weather, rain, wind, all kinds of stuff. And so there very well could be some more in there. And by this time, for one thing, if you plan on eating them, they're going to taste a lot better than those that came right from the hatchery. They tend to have a little funky taste to them. But also, by now, they definitely have to have found other ways to eat. So they're gonna be feeding on some aquatic insects and stuff like that. So you should be able to, if there's any left in there, should be able to have a pretty good opportunity. CenturyLink Lake usually lasts a little bit longer. They stock 2,500 in there. Even more in Fremont Lakes #2. It's about a 45 minutes to an hour, depending on where you are in town. And best opportunity, it's stocked a little bit more heavily, is Two Rivers State Recreation Area, Lake #5. In March, they stocked 10,500 rainbows, and in April, another 6,000. So that's a pretty good opportunity if you want to try to get some stocked put and take trout.
I think Two Rivers requires that you buy a permit, doesn't it, Mike?
That could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Fremont Lakes. Mahoney State Park, you need a state park pass.
Yeah, but Two Rivers, in addition to the state parks pass, they also require, I think, a $3 trout stamp or trout pass
Right.
for to fish. So
I have not been out there, but there's a place like that in Utah.
yeah,
Where you pay $4 to get in.
yeah.
They give you a little pass, and then you have to keep what you catch.
I'll check on it and let everybody know next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can keep 3, and it's like either $3 or $6 to hammer it always goes out there.
Now I did hear a rumor, that a lot of the trout that they stocked this year were a little bit bigger than normal. Last year, I think they were closer to 10 inches. But I think they're closer to 12 this year. A lot of people have commented that they're seemed a little bit bigger. This I thought was really interesting this year. The bluegill in Walnut Creek have been improving in the last 5 years. I think every year they've gotten a lot better. If you look at that graphic, the little where I have it highlighted in red, out of the bluegill that they got in their trap net, very small percentage were 3 to 6 inches. Probably 95% were 6 inches or larger. But if you look at that percentage there on that bar graph, that's over 8 inches, that's quality bluegill fishing.
Mm.
And just the reason I find that so interesting is it's not because of that lake is just, I think, really blessed with really good habitat. It's frustrating fishing from the bank a lot of times. Some people are frustrated in boats because a lot of it's real shallow, but those shallow, weedy flats like that protect the young. They give good spawning areas. The forage fish, not the forage fish, the predators that they have in there, there's a lot of big catfish. There's decent sized bass in there. The walleye are doing fairly good in there. They stock them as advanced fingerlings, so they're like 8 to 9 inches when they stock them in there, and in about a year to 2 years, they're over 15 inches. They just grow so fast, so they're able to keep the smaller bluegill, crappie, green sunfish all fairly under control, and allow these bluegills to get bigger. So if you can find some areas, I put a little thing in there about spawning begins early May and lasts through mid-June. There's a lot of places around Walnut Creek where you can just kind of fairly easily, but you got to do a lot of walking. Walk along the banks, and if you see some areas, you'll notice about mid-May, early to mid-May, there's a lot of weed growth from the banks out. So if you're planning on like throwing a bobber out there, you're not going to be able to fish, because from about 1.5 to 2 feet deep on out to about 6 feet, it's going to be a solid mat of weeds. But the spawning beds are in that in those areas between the big bank of weeds and the shoreline. So as you walk along the bank, sometimes from a distance you can see the surface of the water. You can see little wakes where they're chasing small bluegills out of their nesting areas, competing for some of the prime spots, or otherwise just kind of being aggressive. Or they're actually fanning they use their tails to fan a little dish-shaped, about a plate size depression, and that's where they lay their eggs. So a lot of times from a distance you can see the water kind of moving around, and that's either going to be or is a bluegill spawning bed. Usually it's 1 to 4 feet deep. Sometimes the bigger ones are in the little bit deeper water, but sometimes they're pretty much scattered around. A place like Walnut Creek with the numbers in there, pretty much all the bluegills you're going to find on the spawning beds are 7.5 inches long or bigger. If you catch some of those 10s out of there, I put on their practice catch and release or selective harvest. If you're catching those 10-inch fish, those should probably go back because the genetics of those big, strong fish will go into the future broods. You don't want the fish that are, they were stocked in there in 1998, 97, 96 is the last that any bluegill were stocked in that lake. Some of them were able to grow big. Some of them stayed a fairly short size. So if you look at weir span, I guess Lawrence Youngman is a better example. Pretty much half and half, 3 to 6 inches, and then between 6 and 8. A lake like that, that's kind of, you hear terms like overpopulated, stuff like that. Lawrence Youngman probably doesn't have a lot of walleye, catfish, bass in numbers and quality that's big enough to control them. And then, of course, habitat. But in a place like Walnut Creek, if you eat the 7.5 and 8-inch fish, if you're going to keep any, and release the 9.5, 10 or bigger bluegills, if there are any, that's the ones that are going to be the genetics for the future broods. And so they'll grow faster, they'll grow more robust. If you take those fish that are several years old and they're only 7 inches long, they pretty much stay that way. And you don't want those genetics to get into the pool. Prairie Queen is, it's getting there. But none of the other lakes really are showing good numbers of those huge bluegills that are over 8 inches.
Yeah, I don't see, and you probably won't, but another lake to watch over the coming years is the one out on Fort Crook Road that they just redid, Standing Bear.
Standing Bear.
Standing Bear is going to be really
Oh,
good
Standing
over
Bear,
the next
right.
few years. Yeah,
Um,
and Cunningham, not Cunningham, but yeah, Glen Cunningham up in my area. They've been doing
Right.
really, really well up there on Sawguy. So
Now they have saugeye and wiper and white bass, I think, in that lake. So again, that's the predators that you need
yeah,
to get a good healthy population of the panfish. Again, with
yeah,
this little chart, this is from the stocking database, and in this is all that was ever stocked for bluegill in Walnut Creek. So if you look at those really low numbers of 6-inch bluegills that were stocked several years ago, that's all it took to get it to the point where it's a really good bluegill fishery. Back to the, if you're fishing in those spawning beds, for bluegill, my favorite way to do it is with floating flies. So anything that'll float real easy, like elk hair caddis. You can use foam flies, the gurglers, and if you can see that in my little picture, but foam flies, gurglers and stuff like that. Anything that'll float real well. Start on the edges of like if you have an area where there's a bunch of beds, it'll look like the dimples of a golf ball. They'll be all in one big area. Start on the edges. Don't start right in the middle because you're going to spook a few fish and then they're all going to kind of scatter a little bit. Just start on the edges and kind of work your way in. And again, just make sure you let the big ones go. Crappie, again, Walnut Creek. 1998, 99, they stocked crappie in there, and nothing since then. It's probably one of the best crappie lakes in the eastern side of the state. If you look at the number of 10 to 12 inch and greater than 12-inch crappie, that's probably a third. An 8 to 10-inch crappie is a good eating size crappie too. So again, catch and release or selective harvest, where you're taking those middle fish and you're leaving the big ones. Just another example of that, let's say Flanagan. The biggest fish are in the 10 to 12-inch range. There's not that many smaller ones. That's not a very good example. Say Prairie View. You've got a whole lot of fish that are 8 to 10 inches, very few that are 10 to 12. You know, it's pretty hard to, if you want to keep a few, it's pretty hard to take that 11, 12-inch crappie and throw it back. But if you're getting a bunch of them, you can keep 15, I think is the limit in most of these lakes. 15, 10-inch crappies is a lot of fillets. So just keep it to those middle-sized fish. Again, for being that long since any crappie have been stocked in Walnut Creek, and to this day, I've been amazed at how the quality of crappie that come out of there. Prairie Queen is coming along. They don't have as many crappie, but they are coming along.
Yeah, I did pretty good there last year. Over by the breakwater.
Right. Now, the nests for crappie aren't, they're a little bit maybe mid-April through mid-May. So they're going to be first. Their nests aren't as obvious. You don't see the dish-shaped depressions and all that stuff. But they usually can be seen pretty easily around riprap if it's a sunny day. Just take a leisurely stroll along the dam. It's not every place where there's riprap. There's some areas that have a few of them and some areas that don't have any. But just kind of walk along the riprap and just kind of keep an eye peeled between the weeds and in around those rocks. A lot of times you'll see a big crappie moving in there. They'll be in about 1 to 6 feet deep. I definitely have noticed that the bigger crappie are further out. The smaller ones take the ones that are closer to a foot deep. But it's exciting fishing. Sometimes it's sight fishing. You see the crappie, you put a slow sinking streamer, like a bucktail streamer, like a black-nosed dace, put it in there and it'll just very slowly sink, and you can just pull it along real slow and you can just watch the take, and it's a lot of fun. So Prairie Queen and Cunningham, I think Flanagan is going to be really good, but I'm not sure though. Flanagan has special rules. I'm not sure if they're all catch and release. No, Flanagan this year changed it to, I believe they have a 10-inch. They have to be 10 inches in order to keep them. So they're trying to adjust, I think, the year classes and stuff. You can see that out of the crappie, most of them are 10 to 12 inches. So I think they're trying to balance out the fishery a little bit. So this year, I'm not sure the number, just check your regulations, but I'm pretty sure they have to be 10 inches long to keep them.
Yeah, and I think it's May 11th that we've got our next Naran tournament scheduled. I'll have to check on that. But I was thinking we could hit one of these lakes for crappie. We'll have to think about it, or bluegill. We'll have to think on it a little bit more, but
I will admit that Walnut Creek, the best crappie fishing that I found during the spawn is climbing on rocks a little bit. You got to do some billy goat action. Prairie Queen, it's a little bit easier to access. I only know like one area, that rock jetty that I think you were on as well, John.
yeah, that's where I go.
There's another one that's straight out from that. And I walked around and I walked all up and down that and I didn't see a crappie. So I don't know if it's sun direction, wind direction, you know, what puts them in certain pockets, but I just feel like maybe Prairie Queen wouldn't be, maybe for a pop-up outing.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good place for that.
Yeah.
Walnut Creek, I just wonder if crappie would be that good, but you know, as long as we have people that can get around and crawl on the rocks a little bit, I think Walnut Creek might be a good option. There's red ear and green sunfish, a lot of them in Prairie Queen, and they're starting to get a little bit bigger. The red ears, when you get shell cracker, is a term in the South they use for them. If you get one of those, I like to use those gurglers and go in around the trees, and try not to get it caught in the trees. But when a red ear hits it on the surface, they come out of the water. I mean, they just smash it and they fight like a donkey. They really are fun fish to catch on a fly rod. Walnut Creek has a lot of them. They're pretty much in both lakes. They hybridize with the bluegill. But if you can get a pure or almost pure red ear, they're just a blast. Green sunfish are a lot of fun and a lot easier to take the hook out of their mouth. They have the bigger mouth. They're pretty much smaller, but I have seen some beautiful green sunfish bluegill hybrids in Walnut Creek. They seem to be at the tail end of the spawning period. For some reason, one day I was out there thinking that I missed it or that, you know, it was over. And I ran into just a whole bunch of green sunfish bluegill hybrids, and they were bruisers. Big mouth, and then they tend to be a little bit thicker across the shoulders.
Yeah, and that's what Game and Parks is stocking now, the hybrids.
I asked them about that, how they're doing, and they said they're kind of expensive and they've
Yeah.
had kind of limited success, so they may start backing off of the hybrids, at
Okay,
least for a while. But in some of the park ponds, Fontenelle, Benson, Halleck, some of those places, they stock some hybrids in there.
yeah, and they've changed the size that they stock. They were stocking little ones, but they found the bass like them like candy. So they
Right.
started going with the larger fish. So when they do stock them, they're a bigger fish now, so you get a better chance of surviving.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, those hybrids, are they able to reproduce, or are they type of hybrid that the gene, like a mule is a hybrid too and can't reproduce?
Right. Now I'm not sure. I need to ask Daryl that. I know that green sunfish and red ears, if they're in lakes with bluegill, they will hybridize. Often. A lot of times you'll catch a fish that has attributes of both. Whether those can, I think I read somewhere that they can, but I'll ask Daryl and get an answer for that. That's an interesting question because I know the wipers, the white bass, striped bass hybrid, they'll try. I mean, they'll kind of go through the motions, but they're not, they don't
Yeah,
reproduce.
right.
If
But
if I just use my experience in catching fish, especially out of Halleck Park, I have caught an awful lot of hybrids out of Halleck that were in the 1 to 2 inch group area. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking that those they weren't stocked. I'm thinking they were bred there. So
Yeah, there's,
Excuse
you really
excuse-
notice that the red ears in Prairie Queen, like ice fishing, you catch a whole lot of them that have barely a little red tip on their ear, but no other, they look like a bluegill otherwise, or vice versa. Walt, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was, I have an old quarry on my place. And it's an acre and then I'm stocking it or building it back up because I had a big bad fish kill. And they said if I put in hybrids, bluegills, it's like 1 in 1 in 1,000 will reproduce.
Huh,
But for the genes just have to be just right. But they do reproduce, but it's a very high number of, I don't know what you want to call it, sterilization.
yep. And in some cases, that's a management strategy. You know, you look at, again, that slide I had on Walnut Creek where a few, maybe less than 2,000 were stocked. And to this day, the thing is just so full of bluegill that if you're managing a small pond like what you're talking about, it might be better to go with hybrids so you don't have to worry about it getting exploding populations.
Yep.
Crappie or trash fish in Iowa, they get so overpopulated in some of their lakes that they just rather not even have them around. They're considered kind of an invasive.
Well,
Yeah,
we,
and
we were-
northern pike I referred to as trash fish in upstate New York and some of those other areas too. So,
I was fishing the other day and we were using a crackleback on the quarry. And every cast we were bringing in a bluegill that was about as big as your index finger, but nothing big.
Right.
So I'm gonna go out and acquire a bunch of 12-inch bass to see about eliminating the bluegill from it.
Bass and maybe a few channel cats. People don't think of them normally as a predator fish, but they will eat a lot of little bluegills.
Well, I put in-
crocodile might help too, Walt.
Well, I put in about 100 channel cat. They did, and we're feeding them, and they're about 12 inches long now. They've
Nice.
grown. So, and we were
Now-
catching channel cat on a crackleback. So
Yep, you can get them on woolly buggers pretty easy too. Now, we had one of our Naran tournaments. I'll get to that here in a minute. This just kind of some other opportunities, not necessarily for fly fishing. Pretty hard to get walleye on the fly, although you can. That's the most recent sampling for largemouth bass. It looks like Louisville #2 has tons of bass. If you want to, that to me is a good lake for fly fishing for bass because there's a lot of them in there. Even if they're smaller, on a fly rod, they're a lot of fun. So Cunningham, actually that would be a lot of fun too with a fly rod. Walnut Creek kind of goes up and down with the bass. They've had years where there was almost half of them were over 15 inches. But they do have a lot of good natural reproduction. I don't have the numbers for when the last ones were stocked. Smallmouth bass, Portal, we're hoping for some, I hate to say I'm hoping for flooding rains, but in order to fill up Portal, we're going to need flooding rains. But Big Elk has been doing pretty good. So if you look at the ratio of the smallmouth that are in there, it's not very big. If you have a float tube or a kayak, that'd be a really fun place to go. Shoreline, it's not too bad. And if you don't catch any fish, there's thousands of huge bullfrogs. And that's a lot of fun on a fly as well. Walleye Prairie Queen is doing really good if you have a boat. And then we're way past the window for northern pike on the fly. Lake Wanahoo is starting to fizzle out. They're not going to stock any more northerns in Wanahoo. It's just starting to silt in too bad, and they just don't have the habitat for them anymore. Flanagan has several good years left in it, I think. Probably at least another 5 to 10 years. And that's the out of the sampling they did. I don't think that's this year. I think that came out too soon for it to be this year, but it might be. But that's the ratio out of the fish that they caught, the lengths of the fish. There's a couple of them between 34 and 40 inches. So for Omaha, that's pretty good for northern pike. And I'll tell you what, even bigger than 20 is a lot of fun on a fly rod.
Oh, yeah.
That's right after ice out. Big streamers, Lefty's Deceiver. You know, I always say red and white. That was always the thing with daredevils, you know, when you were spin fishing or whatever. So any streamers that are big, eye catching, but you got to get it right after ice out when it's miserable weather. And Flanagan is a tough lake to fish from the bank. I will tell you that.
Question, have you tied any spoon flies?
I have not.
Okay.
Spoon fly.
Okay, Al, I'll bite. What's a spoon fly?
Well, just for an example, when you get one of the largest of flexible tubing, you know what I'm talking about? It's got
Yeah.
the cotton core inside, and
Yeah.
pull the core out and slip it over a hook and glue the heck out of it, mash it down flat, and then trim it to size. You usually have to put a couple of coats of epoxy on it, and you end up with a spoon. And the spoon is heavy as how much lead you put on the hook shank, and then you add on a tail of marabou or bucktail or whatever the heck you want. But that's a spoon fly.
Are
Okay,
you talking about mylar tubing, like
Yeah,
this with
except
the
it's gotta
cotton
be, it's
core?
gotta be a little bit bigger than that. Or I've done some where I would take a piece of tin foil and shape it along with some epoxy
Right.
to the hook, and then you cover it with different colorings, paint, and all that kind of stuff, glitter. I mean, you make it look like a spoon, except the son of a gun is a spoon light enough to cast on a fly rod.
I'll be
Boy, I
damned.
tell you, you're talking about foil and glitter. You're right up Bill's alley. He's going to come up with a Frankenfly with that stuff.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah.
I'll be quiet. I don't think I can take anymore. Is Bill on here? I was
Yeah,
trying
he
to
is.
Oh, good. I was
I'm
jerking
here.
his chain. This is good.
Hey, I liked reading about Mill Creek.
Yes, caught my first fly caught fish there.
And then the last info I have here is they started stocking some kind of medium-sized bass in a lot of the local areas. Halleck Park, they put 355. They're 7.5-inch bass. I think they're probably going to try to work on some of the green sunfish and little bluegills that are in there. Fontenelle got 700. So we have been going to Fontenelle, like Walt was talking about. We had one of our Naran, our outings out there, and it was a blast because there was a lot of little green sunfish and bluegills, that were, maybe 3 inches long at the most. We did get a couple of, bass up to about, 10, 11 inches. But I think since they just stocked those actually on March 21st, I think with a fly rod, if we go out there for our next, that's why, John, I was saying, hold off until I do this. If we go out there for our next outing, we might be able to get some of those 7.5-inch bass on woolly buggers, gurglers, some of those topwater things. And that's a pretty easy bank access place to fish. So the only thing that might stand in the way of that is there's so many small green sunfish and everything that those things might be full and not want to take a fly. But
Yeah, Schwer is an interesting little, I'm surprised they put largemouth in Schwer.
yeah, I think I put that in there for you, Bill. I think you were asking about that. It's in Papillion. It's a real small, kind of odd shaped little dammed creek.
Uh-huh.
And it must have a lot of little, I think they're putting these in a lot of the places that have small bluegill that are.
Yeah, Schwer's got a lot of little teeny tiny,
Yep.
Gene, oh shoot, I can't think of his last name, used to be the program lead for Lincoln. And I used to fish over there a lot. In fact, I took my son over there and he caught, I think, his second or third fish on a fly rod out of Schwer. And it was
And
one of
then
those
Ben-
little 2-inch greens.
Right. And then depending on where, most of our active vets are, Benson Park or Fontenelle might be good places to go. We usually have a pretty good turnout at Fontenelle. So I just thought I'd bring those up as options.
Well, the problem with Fontenelle, I was over there earlier this month. And I've talked to Larry about it. The cattails over there are really restricting access to the fishing. So Game and Parks and the city of Omaha have been trying to work and figure out how to solve that problem, and they just haven't figured it out yet. So
They might enlist some, I think, trying to remember where it was. It was a new lake and they had some undesirable weeds that took control. And so they sent a couple of scout troops out there to, get some experience. I don't think it was the Eagle Project or whatever, but I think they were just doing it for community involvement stuff, to go out there and get muddy and pull up a bunch of weeds and stuff like that. So maybe
yeah, I
that's
think
an
that
option.
was I'm trying to think of it. Heroes Park, I think is the name of it, out there by the toll bridge in Bellevue.
Right. So that's all I have for my spiel on the fisheries. Anybody come up with any demonstration things? If not, I could do a wet fly or marry some wings or something.
I have a minor technical question.
Technical question?
Yeah. Okay. First, I've got that wool roving. And I want to make some dubbing, like for Jesse, who's the chaplain, because he doesn't have any. So I was going to use some of those wool roving. How long should I cut the fibers? Because remember, they're kind of in a stack, And so how long should I cut the fibers and how sharp should the blade be on my little coffee grinder? My wife got me, the cheapy one for Christmas.
I'll give you what I think, and then I'd like to hear Al's perspective because I know they actually make their own dubbing. What I would say is it depends, and I know people hate to hear that, but you kind of imagine superfine and ice dub. It's long strands, and then there's other dubbing that's like shorter strands. You look at muskrat, beaver, stuff like that. The stuff you use as dubbing, the soft stuff, is shorter strands.
Mhm.
If I had something like that, I was doing some sparkle pupas, and so I have this yarn. It's like a nice Antron yarn, and what I had left over from the making the bubble and all that kind of stuff, I just kind of started to clip it into different lengths. But some of it I left, I cut off a piece about an inch to use for the fly, and then I took the strands apart. It's like yarn.
Uh-huh.
So I left some of them long because some of these long fibers like that will kind of twist around the thread, but then you also want some shorter ones. So I would put them in different lengths, but I probably wouldn't go longer than an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, especially if you're using a coffee grinder. Otherwise, I think you're going to end up causing a house fire. But like a lot of the dubbing that Al produces is some of it was designed for touch dubbing, but it makes really good dubbing for other uses, and that's all fairly short. Al, do you have any from all the experimenting you did?
If you're manufacturing your dubbing, we've done everything under the sun, and for the kind of stuff that we do, we don't want to cut the yarn any longer than a half an inch, you know, if you go 3/4, it's too much. And, yeah, we go a quarter to a half. Depends, and it also depends on which one of our formulas we're making. Because the old we're doing a LaFontaine, that was, anyway, we're doing a LaFontaine version, and that's all shorter stuff because it's for touch, no twist dubbing. So it's a lot different than like our Touchatron, which is a mixture of fibers that are more in the 1/2 inch and 1/3 of an inch range. And if I could get a co-host or something like that, if you want, I went online real quick here and found a Spoonfly if you're interested.
You got it,
Yeah.
your co-host.
Okay,
All
then
right.
let's see if I can do a screen share.
Whoops.
There it is.
I'm
Hang
not
on, I-
seeing it, Al.
Well, I haven't done it yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting it set up. I had several things open and I needed to verify.
By the way, while you're
See.
doing that, I want to thank you for that LaFontaine video you put up. That's an amazing video, especially the memorial at the end.
Oh,
Oh, my goodness.
yes. And that's one of many. I think there's a lot of others too that you can. There's another
Cool.
Spoonfly. You know,
You know, I would think if a lot of those look like they're lead dumbbell eyes. If you used like a lighter weight eyes like bead chain or smaller dumbbell eyes, I think that fly would kind of flutter back and forth.
it does.
As
It
it's
flutters
dropping.
really well. It flutters and falls, and then you pull it up, and it kind of wiggles going up, and then it flutters side to side as it sinks in the water column.
Al, have you ever put a propeller on the front of it?
I have. I've also put a propeller. You know, you see on that one right there where the tail ends.
Yeah.
If you take a fine piece of monofilament so that it's slightly longer than that, it's fun to put a propeller just out past the end of the tail.
Okay. I never thought about putting it on the end. Yeah.
I'm giving you a tip. If you're
Yeah.
fishing panfish, and
That
if you
is
want
cool.
to if you want to drive the bass in your area crazy, you've
That-
got the
Leave it on that fly right there. There's a jig called a doggone it. This was 25 years ago. But it was the lead portion was shaped real similar to that gold right there. And there was a jig called a fuzzy grub. And the one I'm talking about was called a swimming fuzzy grub. And it's shaped very similar to that gold blade right there. But that's kind of made out of lead. And then it had some rubber grub material and some marabou sticking out of the back of it. And I would cast that out in the weeds where it was, there's a lot of bass in these little small pockets of the weeds. And so I would cast it and then let it drop down into that hole. But then as I would lift my rod tip, the shape of that would allow me to pull that back up to the surface. And so you could kind of dip down into those holes. And if you didn't catch anything, you'd move to another hole and let it dip down through that hole. I bet that'd be an outstanding way to fish in the summertime for bass, which I don't do because it's just so weed choked. I bet you could find some little pockets in the weeds and do flies like that.
Mike, it's called dapping.
Yep.
Well, dapping, but cast it out there a ways. But then,
I got you.
yeah, as you watch it,
I've done
slow
that.
down.
Yep. I used to keep a 14-foot fly rod just for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they thought it was a two-handed spey rod. It's not. It's an absolutely great bass rod for working in amongst the weeds.
Yeah, I do the same thing. It's called Tenkara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll unshare the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Al, I'd
sorry.
really like to see you tie that fly sometime.
Who, me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could do it, but I'm gonna have to wear a wig and a few other things. You're gonna call me Alfonso Dizziness or something like that. But Al Beatty doesn't do that kind of stuff. I mean, we have a phone, we have people, we can't be doing that.
You can call me
Okay,
Al. That was
I'll
in a song.
I'll learn how to do it.
Bill Clumper rose to the bait. I cast the fly once. and
all
came
right,
Ah,
all right.
nah. Oh, I guess I'll have to now. Well, but you know what though? That does give merit for me tying the pom pom on the end of my fly and letting it float loose with that piece of mono on the backside of a fly.
I'll
I
tell
was
you where
afraid
that
you were gonna see that.
Put a propeller on your pom pom.
where that would really be good. Dave Jacobs is going to
Yeah.
he's going to Alaska to do fish for rainbows during the salmon spawn. And so there's these flesh flies. And if you hang a mono off of that with a little pom pom on there, that'd be perfect for these flesh flies that they use up there in Alaska.
I've got a question if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
When you make wings for whatever, okay, Wally wings or any type of wings, what determines the length of the wing to the fly? Is it the length of the shaft, or what do you guys?
So most of the time, like we did that Wally wing and a parachute wing last week. And we talked about it a little bit. The general rule of thumb is that the wing stands up from the hook shank about the height of a hook shank. Now, it depends on how heavily hackled your fly is. It could be probably 1 to 1.5 hook shank. I wouldn't go 1.5. I'd go probably about a hook shank in length for the wing. Al, you've tied commercially. You probably know the rule of thumb better than I do.
Well, first off, the smart ass answer and the true one is you provide what the customer asks for.
Right.
But in the other world, looking at, let's just take east and west of the Mississippi. You get into the Adirondacks and they put on less hackle and they have longer wings. And that's just
Right.
the way it is in the Catskill style of tying. And in the West, I don't know why, but they pretty much are like you said, shank length. But if you look at the real bugs in the water, let's just take a mayfly. If you have a size 14 mayfly, when you look at the body, he's got size 12 wings on him.
Right.
Which is just bigger wings than
Proportion wise, when you look at, I think in fly fishing and fly tying, I think it's more, it's this delicate balance between what a mayfly looks like and how that fly will ride on the water when you cast it and it lands on the water. So of course, ideally you would look at a mayfly and you'd make the wing the same proportion as a mayfly, but sometimes you need a little bit taller of a wing or shorter of a wing. Al talked about this with weight of the fly. Sometimes with you might need the wing to be a little bit further back than the natural insect would be, just to balance that fly and make it float on the surface correctly. So there's a lot of debate about how long the tail should be on a mayfly. If you look at an actual mayfly, the tail is a lot of times twice the body length.
Yep.
We normally go about a shank length for the tail because we're using stiff hackle fibers. We're not using, wispy little nature's strands that come out of the back of a mayfly. But also with the hackle, of course, the hackle helps hold the fly up, helps, keep from breaking the surface tension. But I think a lot of times, especially like with an Adams, they use the grizzly and brown. That's not intended to be that mayflies have some legs that are striped and some legs that are brown. I think what that does is it kind of gives an illusion of vibration, an illusion of movement. Especially with a spinner, when a spinner falls on the water, a lot of times there's a vibration to them. There's a little bit of a vibration, and so anything that like splays out a little bit, you know, the hackle that we have on our flies. And a mayfly doesn't have hackle barbs sticking up around its wings, but
The other
I
thing
think
you
they're
need to think
effective
of,
because they kind of show some illusion of movement. John, go
the,
ahead.
the other thing you need to think about too is, and I hate to say this, but it's the aerodynamics of the fly.
Right.
When you cast the fly, it's subject to aerodynamic forces. And if the fly isn't properly designed, it's going to tumble and twist and get all screwed up. So a lot of times you'll see, in fact, you know, I think the reason that we try to make sure that our flies are symmetric is more about the casting ability of the fly than it is about whether or not it floats and looks like a fly. Because if you've got wings that are off center, that fly is going to do some really strange things going through the air, and you're going to get wind knots in your leader and everything else. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. 99%. The rest is how it actually lands on the water and sits on the water. It's a dumb example, but I tied some gurglers and I was getting creative with what I was doing for like hackle hanging down below. So to me, it would like be hanging down like as legs or whatever. And what it did was it flipped them over every single time. So the hook was riding hook point up and, you know, the foam side down. And so, you know, I was not catching anything. So I tried to find, you know, with a pocket knife, tried to clip the hackle off so it wasn't making it flip over. A lot of it is how the fly lands on the water. A lot of it is, you know, showing the illusion of movement. But like John said, a lot of it is flying through the air. Al is the master of the Wonder Wing, I think, in today's world. The Wonder Wing came about a long time ago, and nobody liked it because people would tie their Wonder Wing in with the stem tied down to the body of the fly. And so as that would go through the air as you're casting it, it would take that fly and just like John's saying, it would twist the leader, twist your tippet, especially if you had a real fine tippet, it would twist it all up and cause problems. Well, the way Al does his Wonder Wings is you don't have the stem, the rachis of that feather. All you have tied in are the barbs. And I tried to show that on my hex fly that I did last week. You just want those barbs to be tied down, not the stem of that feather, because that lets that wing flex a little bit in the wind as you're casting it. That wing might fold back a little bit in the you know the air, but once it lands down, then it's going to stand up, and that keeps at least reduces the twist in your leader. There's some flies that are just going to do that, but I guarantee you, if you're you know Wally wings, Wonder Wings, they're cool looking. But those kind of things is depending on how you tie them to the hook shank, they can twist your leader and cause a lot more frustration than they're worth.
The best wing for a non-twisting upright wing is CDC. That's what it boils down to. And make sure you don't put any stems in it.
CDC is an outstanding wing. You hear Tim Flagler talking a lot about he does a CDC and elk caddis. It was actually Hans Weilenmann, I think, that did the original from Netherlands. It's like an elk hair caddis, but underneath the elk hair is CDC. And the little fibers of CDC, they're wispy and they have little hairs sticking off of them, like little micro barbs hanging off of each barb. And they actually move around in the surface film, like if it was on a lake. You don't have the, you know, we're not talking like a choppy river or stream in the mountains. But if you're fishing it on a lake, those little CDC fibers are just kind of moving around with every little like small wave or whatever. They really move around a lot. That movement that it just imparts in that fly really makes it look alive. Problem with CDC, you definitely don't want to use a gel floatant. Frog's Fanny, I think I still have it up here. Frog's Fanny, the dry desiccant kind of things is what you want to use for CDC. But couple of false casts usually, and you'll dry it out, and it's a good wing to use. But there's pros and cons to everything. You get a beautiful wing with a like Al and Eric were doing wings made from slips of wing slips. They call them quill wings, but they don't really have much to do with a quill. But a lot of the catskill flies have like duck quill wings, and they look beautiful when you tie them. But you really don't even have to catch a fish. After about 3 or 4 casts, the wing is just shredded. So there's pros and cons to every wing style.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
I think married wings are primarily look good in a showcase, but they don't fish very good. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
beautiful, absolutely gorgeous.
They are beautiful, but I'll tell you, like the Parmacene bell, or the Parmacini bell, as Eric calls it. I guess a lot of those kind of flies were actually designed to represent a brook trout's fin. I think even the Native Americans used the fin of a brook trout. You look at the fin, it has like a white edge on it, and there's a little bit of like some red or orange or whatever. And they would actually use the fin of a brook trout as bait, like as an attractant or whatever. I'm sure on the smaller fish or whatever, the bigger fish look for that fin as something to key on, to target on. And so a lot of those flies, like the Colonel Fuller, Parmacene bell, a lot of those things are kind of designed, at least initially. You start getting into art after you different colors and stuff like that, but I think initially they were designed to be a brook trout fin.
Yeah, a lot of Ray Bergman's wet flies were married wing flies, and he did some. If you don't have it, you ought to try and find and get his book. And the plates that are in there are absolutely amazing. It just makes I just wish I could tie it well enough to even come close to tying some of those.
Marrying wings can, it's everybody's always afraid of it, but really you can take any feather. This is just a white mallard, or not mallard, but a white duck quill. Anytime you've taken a feather and kind of stroked it like that to straighten out because it was split a little bit, kind of take it and stroke it like that, you just married wings.
Mike, why don't you just leave it on the feather, but just break a little piece down there, show the group the split, and then you just marry it back together right while it's on the stem. There you go.
Yeah, so like right here, just take about 3 or 4 of those, and like it's kind of twisted or whatever. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, that's good.
Then, you just take it and stroke it a little bit. You kind of twist, like I'm taking my thumb and finger and twisting a little bit back and forth. And, you just see right there, there's a little bit of a split. If you just kind of keep working at that. You end up
then
marrying it
there
together.
you got it.
So,
Not that
Like-
easy when you got individual slips.
You know,
Well, now, I'll tell you what,
there's
John,
something we
this-
might.
Go ahead, Al.
Sorry. I'm sorry. There's something you might want to talk about. If married sounds like a good thing, first off, they come apart in the water real quick. And there's a really good substitute you can do that maybe we should plan for like next season or something. You can do with dyed calf hair built in stacked hair wings so that they don't get chewed up. They'll always have the red stripe in the middle or the white stripe in the middle of a red one or whatever. And that's
so
the
it's
way you
kind of like
take the hair on.
kind of like a Mickey Finn wing.
Absolutely. Only
Okay.
you do it as a stacked wing and it's on a smaller fly like there you
So like Al was talking about, or John was talking about it, if you're just trying to do individual fibers. If I wanted to do like 2 fibers of red and 2 fibers of white, what I would do is take a big chunk of the red, right? I've got about, I over exaggerating, but I've got about maybe 10, 10 fibers there. I'm going to cut those away. Before I go too much further, Eric likes to talk about the left and the left. We'll do, got the wrong feather. The lefts will do the opposite side and the rights will do the near side. It doesn't really matter. The key is that if you look at this feather, this is the, like the normal side, the pretty side. If you turn it around, that's the back side where you can see the stem, the rachis, and you can see like that shiny stuff along the edge there. So that's the bottom, that's the top. As long as those feathers match, you see the long fibers are off to the right in this case, and the little short ones are off to the left. Those feathers match. Ideally, you would have the number 2 wing off of the left, the feather off of the left wing and the number 2 feather off of the right wing. But it really doesn't matter that much as long as it's left and right married together.
And that
So-
goes between species too. So you could have, I'm going to be facetious here, but you could have a pigeon feather right and a goose feather right, and you could actually marry them together, but you cannot do opposite sides.
Now see that,
Right.
Al, I didn't know that. I didn't know you could marry goose and duck.
There's
Oh,
a whole
yeah.
bunch of things you can marry as long as they are all lefts or all rights.
I'll be darned. Okay,
Because
well
they all have the Velcro go in the same direction on each wing.
okay, well, you know what? That simplifies a whole lot of the problems I've been having. Thank you for that.
So I've got, if I want to get just 2 white and 2 red, I'm taking several white and several red, and I'm going to marry those together. So I basically just want to line up the tips as best I can. And then I'm just going to kind of stroke those until those little micro barbs marry together.
Okay, then you can eliminate.
Okay. So
Yeah,
now,
okay.
so now they pretty much married together. So now I can take my bodkin
And split them.
and split them.
Yeah.
And I need reading glasses for that, but
You can do a real gee whiz by putting one stripe of black in between each color change, and it'll just be an absolute mind blower. And you're going to do exactly like
Right.
Mike did. You put a big one on and take away everything.
so you take, say that looks like 3 whites and you just separate them away like that. And then pull that away. And then you go up through 3 reds
And then you can
You
marry the
separate 'em?
bottom to the top.
and you take those away. So now you've got 3 reds and 3 whites married together.
And then
Like
you can
Al's
take,
saying, you want to say this was black on the top, go down to one strand of that top color. Then I can go back to the white. I don't know if I can do it with that same little slip that I had cut off. And marry that back. Then you've got one strand of red. And then a big collection of white on the top. And you can marry those.
Yeah.
That's it
one
right there,
strand of
Mike.
red, 3 white on top, 3 white on the bottom, and 1 strand of red. I don't know if you can see that.
Doesn't that look cool though?
It is, it is. And you know what? Al, Mike, thank you so much. I know what I'm gonna be doing tomorrow now.
You know,
And-
the problem is like Eric was saying, these are kind of hard to find. A lot of times you look them up online and everything's out of stock. If you can come up, like I came across, I've got silver red. I bought these actually for the Parmachene Belle before Eric came around. I love that fly. And I saw a Fly Fish Ohio guy do that. And thought it was so cool. So I did a bunch of those. I've got a lot more reds left than whites because I've done some other things with it. But just make sure you have plenty. And you can do that with any, well, I mean, pheasant tail isn't as obvious, but you do kind of, okay, those are separated away. But now I can kind of marry them back together. If you want to just practice it, leave them on the racus and pull them away and then put them back. And once you get that feel, you know, sometimes you, like I said, sometimes you twist your, not twist, but you kind of roll your fingers a little bit to get everything in line. But you just kind of stroke along there and get those micro barbs to where they're all touching. Just make sure you
Mike?
have feathers to mess with it.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
These are some of the marriages that
Hang
I,
on, let me spotlight you real quick.
Yeah, Walt has done some amazing
Oh,
married
yeah.
wings.
I can't,
Yeah. Beautiful.
can you see them?
Yep.
Okay, well, crap, okay.
Yeah, and stop moving, just hold them. There you go.
Right there.
Up a little bit,
Anyway,
up, just hold it up. Well, I'll tell you when, stop.
there.
There,
But I mean, it took me years, a long time to do this when I had coronavirus. Had nothing to do. And I thought I'd make a Vietnam fly with them,
Perfect.
but I had no freaking idea how to connect these to a hook. So actually, one of them took me about 2 years to master, and the other one took me about maybe a half hour with Kenny House with me. Showing him how to do it.
Yeah, and you can go out to Eric Austin's YouTube channel and he can show you how to marry them and how to hook them up to the hook too.
Yeah, he did a pretty good presentation. Eric Austin. It's called Traditional Flies and Dries. That's the name of his YouTube channel, Traditional Flies and Dries. There's hardly any dries on there, but
There's another thing I'd like to ask. Has anybody ever tied any origami wings?
no.
Yes,
Who said yes?
Al in
LB.
Idaho.
And I've learned how to tie them, but what's the best way to attach them to the hook?
Well, attaching them to the hook is part of the part about origami, because all you do is take all the fibers off of one side of the shaft, stem, racus, whatever the heck you want to call it, so that it's only on one side, and then you bend that into a circle with the fibers sticking to the
yeah.
inside. You stroke them on, and then they're going to just pop right back open if you don't tie them to the hook.
I understand that, but could you put two of the two of the flies together? Or I guess you can bend
Oh,
it to
that- you
adjust.
you can do that, Walt, yes, but the fly is so overweighted that you don't typically do that. Usually you put that kind of a wing on and tie it on as a post type of a wing. Often you can turn it into a parachute post because it only takes a couple of turns of thread around those those two stems tied together that form the wing to make a parachute to post real easy. That said, the origami is a beautiful wing and a nice gee whiz thing to do. You do not want to try to cast it. It will just twist your leader up terrible.
I'll bet.
So just stick with dynamite then, huh?
Yep.
You know, a quarter of a stick of dynamite is guaranteed as long as you don't blow yourself up. And I take it that you were in Vietnam, so you know how not to do that.
So,
I was
so
a
you get that
medic, so-
dynamite from Acme?
I'm sorry?
Do you get the dynamite from Acme?
I'm
Like the
not talking
Coyote and
about
the
that.
Roadrunner?
No comment anymore. I'm good
Exactly.
to
No
you.
comment. Keep quiet.
We're on social media.
Boy, you can tell the Vietnam veterans, can't you?
Just like I always struggled with this because everything I always saw, they said you have to do let me zoom in a little better. They always said you have to like bring the thread up between, like have the wing on top of the hook shank. Bring some better light in here. And then bring the thread up between your finger and thumb. Do the pinch wrap like that and pull straight down to do the wing, to set the wing. Well, the way Eric Austin does it, and he's done thousands of these, is he does that pinch, but then he grabs this front part of the wing and lets it collapse with the weight of the bobbin. And that's for my wing hanging off the back here. And so that puts it right on top usually. And then if you go to Eric's channel or you go to Al's channel, Al, just type in Al Beatty fly tying if you're not familiar with his channel. And the latest East meets West, they talked about different quill wings they call them, but slip wings like this and how to mount them. And he's got a really cool tool. Al does have a really cool tool that holds equal pressure on both sides of that thread so that it collapses it down on top of the
And if
wing.
anybody is interested, and Al, I'm gonna plug your East-West Facebook thing if you don't mind. Al and Eric do every Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. And East meets West fly
Easy for
time.
you to see.
Eric was originally from the East Coast up around Plattsburgh, New York, which is my old stomping ground. And of course, Al is from out in Boise, Idaho. And they do the difference between basically Catskill flies and Western flies. And it is a great opportunity to watch two master tires. So anybody interested, just let me know and I will send you the link if that's okay with you, Al.
Absolutely. And then if they're interested, you can share their name with me. I'll put them on the mailing list and they'll get all of our stuff.
Great. And I will make sure that you have Al's email address. So
Hey, John,
Right.
would you send me it, please?
absolutely, Al or Walt.
Thank you.
I'm trying to make it, just work has kind of interfered, but I
Yep.
would like to make it because it sounds really super interesting. And I can't Frank in there.
And I'm
It's,
sorry, I didn't say hi, Mitch Geary, hi, Emo, hi, Jason Howell, and hi, Art Haney. But I know you guys have been here for a while, but thank you for
For
coming.
the East meets West, Bill and whomever else, it stays live, or let me rephrase, it stays recorded from a live presentation on Facebook for a week. And Eric and I both upload a UT up to YouTube the very next day. So a day after it's up, for example, today's Thursday, and mine went up today about 10 o'clock this morning.
Yep.
So from 10 o'clock on, you've got the identical thing on YouTube. So it's, if you're not on live, you got plenty of time to join later and look.
Yep.
And
Thank you, sir.
like John
Oh, and by
said,
the way,
it's
thanks for sending the book. Oh, sorry.
like John said, it's interesting to see similar flies from east, where flies are a little more sparse and dainty and lightweight. And then for western waters, a lot of times they have to be more heavily hackled and beefier flies. It's just really interesting to see the different styles. But when each one of them brings out their fly, then that brings up stories that to me, that's the big treasure, is just hearing the history and the stories behind the flies. So
And what I found extraordinarily interesting was the discussion about, especially with the Catskill tires, not wanting to use the hackle. Shoot, I just had a mental blank. Whiting hackle, because the fibers are so dense, and they use other hackle because they're more sparse hackle. So I had never really thought about that. That was just a phenomenal discussion that week.
If you knew how many hours we spent when I worked for Tom at Whiting Farms in the conference room trying to figure out how to increase barb density, all I can tell you is that I'll leave it at that, but we spent a lot of hours increasing that density, not trying to make it less.
Yeah, and if for a Western fly, that's what you need because of the heavy waters. But then the Catskill guys, they want that less dense hackle, and I never really thought about that, or never really understood that and appreciated it. It was just an interesting discussion all around.
you look at a lot of the old books, I think they were really trying to imitate an actual mayfly, and how it looks. And because of the type of water that they have in the east, it's not the tumbling rough streams that there are in the Rocky Mountain West. So in the Rocky Mountain West, it was more representations of flies than an exact replica kind of thing. Where Quill Gordon, if you're on a lake or a spring creek or a small real slow flowing stream, you might want to maybe even tie on an eastern fly. But for the most part, the difference is because of the waters.
Yeah.
You know,
But I will say this, and this for all of you guys that are new to fly tying, as I am. I'm a novice. Watching these kind of things, you learn stuff that you never thought you needed to learn. And not knowing what you need to know is kind of an interesting thing to think about. So,
and a
Known
better way to look
unknowns.
at that. Go ahead.
Known unknowns and unknown unknowns.
yeah, exactly, Al.
And I think I've been tying flies for 38 maybe years, and I've learned so much in the last year. I've changed ways that I do things, setting those wings like I was talking about. There's a lot of things that you just have to always put in the back of your mind that I don't know everything, and I'm ready to learn something new. And watch all the YouTubes, and we have great opportunities for being Omaha Healing Waters to be able to be friends and be able to take part in presentations by some masters that we can really learn a lot from. So,
And I think that
Right.
one of the things that I've taken away this last year is, and I'm not really sure how to say this, but I have found that fly tying can be extraordinarily precision. I mean, to the point where I watched somebody tying a fly and they actually got a micrometer out and measured the fly. Bill, you would have appreciated that.
Can you tell me the channel, please?
that introduced a whole new concept to me, and it really appealed to my engineering mind that precision in fly tying is important. So thank you, Al. Thank you, Eric, and the other people that I have been had the opportunity to watch and to learn from. It's been a heck of a trip, and I constantly learn a bunch of stuff. So thank you.
I'll say, I think precision is important in fly tying because it makes you focus on what you're doing and why. But if you really look at the masters, if you look at Gary LaFontaine, if you look at AK Best, if you look at, you know, all these people that developed all these flies in the past, a lot of the Whitlock flies, you know, Polly Rossborough, a lot of these flies that were designed and all of these years and years of design went into them. They're scruffy, they're bushy flies. But you want to try to focus on making your tails the same, especially if you're going to tie them for friends or customers. You want to make all the tails the same. You want to make all the wings the same. And you want to get used to that precision, because although it may not be important to the fish all the time, there are times where you have to be pretty precise in order for heavily pressured fish. But if you're going to tie for some friends, or if you're going to tie a few commercial flies, you want those things to match. You want them to look the same. You don't want to give them 12 flies with 8 different proportions of how the wings and tails look.
Yeah, and if you're putting them in your own fly box, I will guarantee you, the ones that look the best are the ones that you'll fish. I've got flies from my fly box from 1975 that I've never fished because they don't look good. So,
But the part of an insect's life that's the most vulnerable, and that fish know this and they key on it, you see a lot of flies that are tied as an emerger or a cripple. It's a lot of the, even when you're talking about spin fishermen, the bass tournament, they look for lures that imitate an injured bait fish. They know that they can't catch there's certain species that come up to the surface, hatch, and fly away. They know they're not going to catch those adults that land on the water. They know that if an adult has a wing laying over to the side or something like that, then that's a cripple, and I can catch that easy, and that's an easy meal, and they come up and sip it. So it's good for you to learn by doing the same proportions of everything. But when it comes down to it, like, John was saying, sometimes you pick the prettiest fly out of your box to use. But if that's not working, grab the ugliest fly and throw that out there. Anyway, we're babbling.
Yeah. Okay, you got a Frankenfly then, right? That's the
Yep.
ugliest fly.
I knew
There you
that was
go.
coming. I
There you
knew that was
go.
coming.
Yeah, I just had to
We're
tease
almost
you.
at an hour and a half.
So I'm
Thanks-
supposed to
thanks,
make a
everybody, for
spoon
coming.
fly? Yeah, so I'm supposed to make a spoon fly? Well, this could be interesting.
Yep. A spoon fly, we'll call that the Bill S. You figure it out what the S stands for. It could be a spoon fly, it could be.
Something
Bill
else.
shit. Probably Bill
I am-
crap.
I am
Never
really looking
forget
forward to
that.
this now. I tell you, we threw him one once before, Al. Remember, we gave him the that stuff that you put down between the sidewalks, and look at what he came up with. So hey,
I don't know, John, you gave Mick and some of the guys in St. Louis the radar fly.
yeah,
They had
Yeah.
some fun with that.
Yeah.
Hey, originality is the key to, I don't know, whatever, but
It took me a half hour, but I caught a trout on it too, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good.
By the way, the trick for using steam on that really old chenille that I got, John, works. You know, steaming it, got it so it's back to being fluffy instead of flat as a brick.
Yep.
Uh,
When,
yeah.
when you were talking about what you were doing with the chenille, I asked Al. I had thought that I had seen one of his not recent, but I thought I had seen a presentation where they were talking about either a blow dryer or steam
Yeah.
for chenille, and that's why I forwarded that to you. That what he
Yeah.
said.
yeah, that was
Steam
about 2
or
years
heat.
ago.
I'll have
Oh,
to do
okay.
that again with a squirrel tail. If anybody has a squirrel tail that looks kind of ugly. I got that from Davey McPhail with a hair dryer. Well, if you want to try it, just take a squirrel tail and a hair dryer and just, apply some heat to one side of the squirrel tail, flip it over and put it on the other side and take a look at it.
Yeah, I think
pretty
that
amazing
came
what that
from,
does.
I think they were trying to straighten out a golden pheasant. Um, yeah, the thing on the
Well,
head.
they did, and it worked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it still is, it's still good today. I bring it up about once every couple of months just to remind the guy that suggested it that it was actually permanent.
Right.
yeah.